Hi, I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avasec Communications and host of StrategyCast. Join me and my guests, innovators, disruptors, and visionaries, as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies that help you transform, scale, and grow your brand. Let me introduce you to Layne Cox, the marketing powerhouse behind the growth of industry giants like Grubhub and Ibotta. Fresh from her latest role at Union, Layne brings firsthand insights to thriving in the fast-moving startup ecosystem. Today on the show, she'll unpack strategies for building high-performing teams, harnessing the power of AI in marketing, investing wisely for lasting growth, and striking the perfect balance between quick wins and sustainable success. And we'll explore why a CEO's belief in marketing is a game changer. Let's dive in. And don't forget to check out the most recent issue of the StrategyCast newsletter on StrategyCast.com. Just like this episode, it's full of inspiration and a ton of ideas that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to StrategyCast. I am so excited to have Layne Cox join the show today. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Lori.
I tell you, I have been looking so forward. I look forward to every show. But I've been looking so forward to chatting with you today. We are going to dive into really defining strategy and scaling marketing communications for startup brands. And oh my goodness, you've worked with, well, right now you're working with Union, but you helped scale Grubhub, Ibotta, and Slice. So, oh my gosh, tell us a little bit more about your journey and what you love most about scaling startup brands.
Awesome. First, I was recently talking to a colleague and was like, you've had really good picks on these startups because not every startup is a win. And so I definitely have had this journey that has taken me through the opportunity of really seeing categories get disruptive and really great consumer brands be built. So it's been great. I got here, I went to Cornell's hospitality school for hotel management, thought I was going to go the hotel route, but really fell in love with marketing and branding and restaurants. So took that path, which ultimately led me to Aramark. First year out of college, I was the lunch lady. My husband still likes to make fun of me, like, how are you the CMO and had all these opportunities at tech companies and you started out as the cafeteria lunch lady. But that's where I went to learn restaurant operations because you really can't build a brand and you can't identify with sort of that consumer unless you've been an operator and really understood what it took to run that business. So 2 years at Aramark. Yeah. 2 years at Aramark, and while I was there, they purchased a company by the name of Seamless Web. It was online food ordering for law firms and big investment firms, late night meals, a way to really aggregate the payments and support sort of, we used to say, it's like, we're the FedEx behind the scenes that enables you to track the payments and so you don't have to do expense reporting, right? While I was there, sort of the boom of tech happened, and that's where Seamless Web decided to spread their arms and become more of a consumer brand. And I was just in the right place at the right time with sort of the right struggles people to be able to say, how do we make this a consumer brand? Everybody knows us as a B2B corporate solution, but we can really build a consumer side. So one of the first consumer brand marketers on the team, rode that and was at that company for 8 years. My big sort of push when we were to talk about scaling when I was there is like, I saw that sort of performance digital at the digital media at the time. You think Google search, right? And display ads, third-party mobile ads, the pop-up in the game that you're playing. This is 2008, 2010. I was like, this isn't going to work. We need more. We need more coming in order to support this. And so I was sitting on the train on the way into work in New York City. And I was like, well, if Delta can be on there and this law firm can be on these subway ads, right? Why can't our cool tech brand be on it? And so I proposed to our executive team, how can we do outdoor media? And that ultimately stepped change the business growth and the trajectory. And it was a wild ride to go from outdoor media to national radio, national television, local television. We sort of did it all. We scaled that brand massively. Everybody on this call now knows that brand as Grubhub. We did merge and IPO together. It was a wild ride. Left Seamless Grubhub to go to at the time, a Series B early stage startup in Denver by the name of Ibotta. They just went public a couple months ago. So another wild ride of it was digital couponing. And so how do you do couponing different? At that, there I had the opportunity of growing their performance and brand marketing team. How do we actually promote this brand, drive it out? And again, massive growth. They've pivoted now to be a little bit more B2B focused because the trajectory and the opportunity was there, but it was massive to be able to go from, if I can remember, we had a couple million downloads to 10 to 15 million downloads. It was like massive scale, which was just fun. Left there because I really like food and restaurants. I learned my core again, go back to, I thought I was going to do hotels and I ended up back in restaurant. There's something about food and
marketing have a great match.
Yeah, there's enough, does F&B that fuels me? I don't know. My dad was also in sort of the food space. So I don't know, maybe it's hereditary, it drops down. But that's why I went back to online food ordering with a bunch of us from the Seamless days. We went to Slice. And what Slice is doing, it's enabling the independent pizzeria to have all the technology and power that you can get from a franchise without losing your independence.
That's
and
great.
Again, wild scale ride, led the B2B and the consumer team there, but wild scale ride of, I think during my time, it was about 3,000 pizzerias to 15,000. If not, they're probably now at like 20. One thing I didn't know going in, you see all these Domino's and Papa John's of the world, but there's more independence. And so we were really, how do we give the right tools and technology to them? So wild scale ride. Slice led into me wanting to do my own thing. So I went and tried to start my own business, online booking for nail salons, which ultimately not the right thing to do during COVID or right as COVID was hitting. So we stopped that. And that's when I lifted my head up and said, I've done marketplaces and this real difficult build of B2B, B2C, let's go do direct to consumer. And at the time in 2020, what was happening, direct to consumer was blowing up. It was crazy. So I jumped in as a consultant to help the largest grower and wholesaler of roses into the United States build sort of new distribution arm. So we had the opportunity of building an Amazon storefront, a luxury but obtainable price floral brand by the name of Pomp with Red Antler, which was super exciting. And then we dabbled in Target marketplaces and sort of a misfits type rose brand, which was also fun. But I then I loved working with them. And if anyone needs amazing flowers, go to Pomp. It is amazing. Huge bouquets at a realistic cost because they're the grower and wholesaler. But ultimately left there, and that's where now I'm at Union. And similar to my entire journey, I like entering at that early phase, the Series B, and how do we actually scale it? We have product market fit. How do you get more people to be aware of it? Use the right messaging, use the right channels to drive it. So what Union is doing is ultimately we're trying to use modern technology and tools and the data to really up-level, enhance the experience for everybody in the on-premise hospitality experience. So you think high-volume bars. We all know that the pain point as a guest when you're in a busy bar is, how do I get my drink and how do I pay and leave when I want to leave, right? For a staff, it's how do I serve more drinks? How do I serve more customers? I'm only one person. How do I do that, right? And for an operator, so maximizing that square footage, right? You can't make your operation bigger and you can only get so many people in. So how do you maximize that? Yeah. And so at the core, Union is a point of sale system. But I like to say that's just our collection device, be able to get the data to really leverage that data to drive a on-premise experience that's richer. So we enable consumers to be able to tap an NFC or scan a QR code to get into the ordering experience. They can open their tab, they can see a digital menu, they can order from that digital menu. And during that experience, we can enrich it by showing them recommendations that are based on their ordering experience and what's available at the bar, as well as provide them offers and rewards and a richer loyalty-driven approach. And so when you do all of that, the guest gets a better experience. They get their drinks faster. They're leaving when they want. And you kind of see how that parlays into the staff then is able to service more customers, get higher tips, and the operators are able to make more money. So my entire career, really, people have heard me say, I was like, I like building category disruptive brands that change the consumer every day. And,
Well,
I
you've
was
definitely done it.
and I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, and I was like, someone says, like, you never realize how your journey's created until you look back and you're like, oh my God, it all actually makes sense. And
Yeah.
that's been my journey. And I look back and I'm like, wow, one thing really did lead to another and gave me the experiences. So I always say, pinch me how I'm at Union. It is the combination of seamless, Ibotta, Slice. It's all of it combined together. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So
Well,
that's my journey. And it's been awesome to scale and grow these brands.
and now you guys know why she's been invited to the show. Because you truly are incredible, amazing. And one of the things that I think is so difficult, and you've done it many times, is truly understanding what the first step is in defining a marketing strategy, especially for a startup. And I think what is missed quite often is people go directly to tactic instead of truly understanding what the strategy should be. What advice do you have for our listeners regarding how they should approach this and really push back if they see the tactical mindset ensuing what really should be strategically driven decisions?
Absolutely. I think it comes to understanding the stage the business is at, right? And I don't think I learned this until sort of my more recent experience at both Union and Pomp. Pomp was 0 to $1 million, right? We didn't have a brand and we had to build it. Whereas Union has been around, existed, we had customers, but ultimately we were looking for a step change of like, what are we going to do to triple this business?
Right.
What are we going to do to maintain the 50% year-over-year growth rates that we need to do, right? And so if you look at those, you have to look at like, what is the stage the business is at? And in order to achieve that stage, what do you need to do? And so that's the tactics I think come in is because people are like, oh, we want awareness ads. Oh, we should be doing Google. We should be but if you're not ready for that stuff, you don't have the foundational systems in place, both from a messaging perspective and from a operational process perspective. Doing the awareness, doing the big picture stuff isn't going to do anything, right? And so when I came into Union, they were doing a lot of things. A lot of things were happening, but nothing was consistently impacting the bottom, like what we needed it to do, right? And so I took a step back and it was all a messaging approach at Union. What are we really trying to sell? How do we educate on that? And it was a lot of internal work to begin with. And that's where it goes back to is like, you really need to understand the stage the business is at, what it needs to accomplish in order to go to that, and then assign the tactics to it, right? And I think kind of a lot of people fail at backing down to that. Is the messaging right? And do we have the process and systems in place, right? Great, you could do a really awesome lead gen campaign, but if your website isn't flowing and it's not tracking effectively, right? Like, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time on it, right? And I think we just miss that. One of the other things I tend to like to talk about is I look at the role as a chief marketing officer as truly the conductor of an orchestra, right? And like you think about the orchestra, it's all those little instruments that are being played. You can play all those instruments, but if the flutes are too loud or the guitar, like they're not working together, you're failing miserably, right? And so that's where like I think the startup advice of anyone coming in is like, what's the stage you're at? What players do you have in your orchestra today, right? And how do you really conduct it in a way that's going to drive it? And at the end of the day, to me, it tends to always start on a messaging perspective. Are we saying the right message, and have we educated everyone internally on that message, right?
I totally agree, and that that cohesion is so important when it comes to aligning thought leadership through what the CEO might be saying, of course, sales and marketing and rev ops and all those different sorts of departments. One thing that I run into consistently, constantly, all the time is that, and we're going to talk about how to establish a budget in a little while here, but the view of the C-suite is far larger than what their budget can handle. And that is where the rub is. And, regarding the right strategy and the go-to-market approach is, do you have the budget to actually achieve that? Talk us through some of those conversations. I love the example of you taking the bus to work and, the bus advertising and out of home. And, was that budget there for Grubhub at that time, or did you have to go fight for it?
In that specific incident, we had to go fight for it. And it was more of, how are we going to measure this? How are we going to know it's working? Because it was the days of, we had performance-based media. They knew the exact CAC we were going after, right? It was very known. if we spend this, we're going to get this. And so this was a risk. And I will have to say, we went out and we said, here's how we're going to measure it, right? Here's what we believe it's going to do. But like with a lot of marketing and brand side, you need to believe in us.
Yeah.
You need to trust us. And so we have hedged our risk a little bit by saying, let's start and test it in a market like DC that we haven't done a lot in and see what it can do and prove out, is this the right way to measure it? And then we moved to the bigger budgets in New York. I think our original test budget was around $40,000 to $50,000. And when we went into New York, it was almost $300,000 to $400,000, right? And so we stepped into, and so it's proving and building confidence in what you're doing. And we had a phenomenal leadership team who said, we agree with you, let's go. And we tested into it. Now, I haven't seen that in all of my companies. I've seen that like some people failing to want to take that risk, right? One of the things we outlined, I've talked about before, is you have to build this culture of being able to take those risks, right? If people on my team don't feel comfortable coming to me and be like, I had this crazy idea, Layne, I think we should do this, right? You're not going to get the big unlocks. And that's what truly, I think, the culture and the opportunity at Grubhub and Seamless I had was a leadership team that enabled us to have those unlocks and have that risk and put together and think through, okay, how are we going to measure it? Okay, now you can have that budget. But I think the desire for certain things without understanding what it really takes, right? I've consulted for some businesses and you put in like, well, this is what it's going to cost. And they look at you like, no, there's no way people are spending that much money on this. It's like,
yeah,
they are.
Marketing is the most under budgeted line item to begin with, at least, of any line item in any organization. It just is. And there's no secret sauce to the amount of money that should be spent, because if it's achieving, the outcome and the goals, that's the most important thing. But with a lot of SaaS startups, they know they've got to, spend 10 to 20% of budgeted revenue, not just the revenue that's being, that they're achieving at number. So, I mean, it's all across the board. Of course, once you're established, you can get down to 5 or 3%, but it takes a lot of marketing budget to get there.
Yeah, and it takes belief. And so I think that's we talked about this earlier in our previous conversations, is there's CEOs who have a belief in marketing and there's CEOs who don't, right? And at the end of the day, I was like, you better find, if you're a marketer and you want to do good things, find that CEO who will believe in you and give you that confidence, right? Because I think that's where people fail, is they get the CEOs just like, nope, it's not going to work. I don't believe in that, right? And there also tend to be the ones that don't realize it's a different skill set across the different marketing org, right? That it takes time. You're investing for long-term, not immediate, right? From a messaging perspective and from a brand perspective, all that takes time. I always tell my teams, I was like, we're building a snowman. We've only put the first bottom on, right? And there's 2 on top, right? We're building a snowman. You got to roll it and make it bigger. And like at some point, but you got to invest in that foundation. Tends to cost money that doesn't necessarily deliver immediately. And so you have to build that confidence and build that trust and the which isn't easy. And, it takes time, right?
Yeah. I would imagine that we all, with all of our fingers and toes, are the number of times that we've either worked with brands or had, marketing partners work with brands that didn't budget enough and there was no way that they were going to succeed. And how ultimately we as marketers can determine what that mindset is before we sign the dotted line, I think is half the battle.
Absolutely.
They talk a good talk. One thing that's always interesting to me as a little bit of a litmus test there is, what we find quite often is that the product itself is really strong, but the brand supporting that product is very, very weak, especially with very, very early stage companies. So just how weak it is, and, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? Just how weak it is and how the CEO or the suite believes in that brand is really a good litmus test for me to understand whether or not we can lift it or not, so that it equals the product quality.
Yep. And will they let you do the right brand work in order to lift it, right? I consulted one time for a company and they were trying to do an outdoor campaign. And they're like, well, we get $50,000 and we want to do New York. And I was like, it's not going to work. Don't do it.
No.
Don't do it. You can maybe target just in Brooklyn, or we could target here. So, but I was like, if that's all you're willing to spend, it's going to fail for you, right?
Yeah, it will.
Similar thing happened during my era of Ibotta, right? We were trying to test international television. The agency we were working with, fabulous agency, recommend we spent bigger, we go broader, we needed to push it. And I couldn't win the budget. And it was like a test channel, a lot of failure probably on my own part, having not done it enough, right? Of like, this is the budget you need. And I was coming from the Grubhub Seamless days where it worked. It was great. Like the budget kept falling, right? It was awesome. But essentially, so we went out and so we didn't spend enough. And we spent, it just it didn't have enough frequency and
Exactly. We tell brands quite often, if let's just say you've got $100,000 to spend and there's no way, over 12 months and the churn is going to be so slow, we're going to lose believers along the way. So quite often what we'll say is let's budget that in 1 quarter and see what kind of lift we can create so that we can develop the model, going down the line on how we can achieve the success that's needed. Budget, again, we don't need to focus on that, but it is a big thing. And there are, I think, very, very unique ways, whether it be testing a DC versus a New York or spending a, consolidated budget in a shorter time frame to create that lift. And there's all sorts of ways to achieve that and meet the strategic goals that we both know are very, very important. So how do you approach the prioritization of in a startup environment of resources that are very, very limited?
Tough question. I don't know if I have the answer to that because aren't we all still trying to figure it out, right? Yeah. It's if we all knew the answer, we would all be successful at it, right? I think from a prioritization perspective, you have to really do, and I said it earlier, you have to balance short-term wins with long-term build, right? And so it is that like, okay, let's do this because guess what? It's going to make the sales team happy. It's going to give us some good internal wins, right? Might not be the long-term build thing that we want to do, right? But it's going to build that confidence and credibility internally, as well as but we're going to continue to build from the long-term side of things, right? Difficult on that side. I also am a big believer of setting the expectation. We can't do everything. And so always presenting, well, here are the things we're working on. If you want to add this to our small scope team, what do we want to move off? Right. And in a startup, things can change as quickly in a day or a week or a month, right? Planning is only as good as if we can stay consistent to it, right? And I always say I love startups because I can start my day expecting it to go one way and whoop, it is in a completely different way at the end of the day. And that's okay, right? But you need to continue to prioritize and understand sort of that piece of it of like, okay, well, 2 weeks ago, it did make sense that we needed to work on sales enablement, for example, right? But at the end of the day, this is the bigger crisis now. And so we need to be able to pivot back. And so I think my teams and I are really good at reprioritizing as we go, right? But having a long-term view of these are the things we need to do in order to build the snowman as you evolve, right?
I think one of the things that is really, really tough here is knowing when to stop something you're doing or just let it go a little bit longer, like the time needed. And it changes by media type and of course the awareness levels and saturation and all of that. But what advice do you have for our listeners today about, okay, here's when we fold them, here's when we, throw another deck out and continue it?
I've kicked me so many times. Like, I think if we just had left it on for another month, that would have turned around, or if we had tweaked that landing page just a little bit. To me, like, I hate saying it, but I think there's a gut call that you have to make as a team.
Agree.
And in marketing is one of those, it's like, can be so analytical, but you have to have that gut of like, this just isn't it. It's not working. Right. So we evaluate on a weekly basis performance. And then on a month, I have my teams do QBRs, right? Which gives us the opportunity to look back. And in the startup land, I always love seeing my employees' face when they do the QBR because they're like, I totally forgot what we did 3 months ago, right? Like we were moving so fast. And you're like, oh yeah, we killed that campaign really quickly, or we pivoted the creative, right? And you see where it goes. But I think it's that build of like understanding what's working, what's not. How do we constantly learn and evolve back? That helps drive that. But yeah, I think it's a gut. You have to call it. And I have failed. My gut has told me a number of times great things and other times not so much. we had at Slice, we we did a big outdoor campaign in New York, and we had pre-bought, I think it was like 6 months, and we were like a month into it, and we weren't seeing anything. And I remember like the dread of coming into the office being like, it's not working. We just spent a ton of money. It's not working. And I looked at my boss and he's like, Layne, you know, it's not a 4-week turnaround on at home.
Especially out of home.
Just go take a deep breath. Stop looking so stressed. And I go, but you walk in and everyone's asking you like, what's happening? Are the installs up? Or you have increased web traffic? And you're like, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? We held our course, stayed confident. This is going to work, right? And it did, right? It didn't blow things out of the water, but we saw what we expected to see. And you have to also have realistic expectations for a channel the first time, right? Of like, we are going to learn. But yeah, I don't know. I hate giving you that answer of gut, but like,
but you know what I love about that answer is it's true. It's right. And it is where AI cannot give you the answer that you need. It's that wisdom check. I was at an incredible AI conference last week called Maycon, and there's just, 1,100 marketers in the room and talking about all the different technologies. And at the end of the day, AI is a tool. It is not a strategy. And that's how people need to look at this. And the human element incorporating AI into the tactics is what is going to ultimately create incredible outcomes. We can do more because of the data that we have at our fingertips. We can ideate a little bit more, with the different versioning that a ChatGPT might be able to push out from, a copy standpoint or a versioning standpoint. We can use tools to help us research the very, very specific neighborhood that a billboard is going to pull very, very well in, not just based on, the audience traffic, but the behaviors that are within that neighborhood that can create more traffic. I mean, that's how we use AI, not the gut, not the wisdom.
Correct. Yeah. The sort of expectation that AI is going to take away marketing, I'm like, ooh, it's not. I think I like to look at it as like, let AI get you started. Let it help you make it better. Make you more efficient in certain areas, but don't make your marketing team all AI, because you're right. You lose the human element. And we have to remember at the end of the day as marketers, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Educating and selling and creating an emotion with our consumers or the client, right? And it is about great brands creating an emotion. They make you feel them. They make you want them. You're inspired to be part of that, right? AI is not going to solve that for us.
Yeah. No, I agree. Before we got on AI, I loved a lot of what you were talking about from the standpoint of being able to, pivot within 2 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks. And it takes a real special team that is very close-knit in order to make that happen. We've become in-house departments for a lot of brands. We've also become an extension of, a 2 or 3 man operation with a lot of brands. And we've just consulted on high-level strategy with brands that, have a large team in-house, and they just need that outside perspective on some things. In your experience, how do you build a team that is right there with you, anticipating your next move or your next need or the CEO's next request so that you can execute on those very last-minute pivots?
Oh, great question. And I think it goes back to sort of my starting message with you all is like, know the stage your startup's at, right? That early stage you want the generalist who can wear a bunch of hats, try a bunch of different things, can really execute fast, right? Then you get to another stage of, okay, we need the head of marketing who can orchestrate all things a little bit more, right? They're not going to be doing doing everything, but ultimately it's a 2 or 3 person team with potentially a little bit of focus in specific areas underneath them so they can attack. Okay, we have the brand creative person. We have the performance analytics sort of operational mindset person, right? And then we have the content, the writer of that state of how it orchestrates together. But ultimately, the way I have always built my scale teams is you need experts who are focused on a key metric within the organization. And I've had the luxury of working for complex organizations that have more than one North Star metric because I love marketplaces, and it's a supply, demand, it's messaging, it's the holy gamut. And what I found is like, if you don't have someone focused on a single metric, you get too wide and you get too hush podge of, oh, I have to do engagement now. I have to do acquisition now. I have to do this. And so it's about putting a sole owner on a specific problem and letting them go deep. And that's how I've been able to, and I saw it happen at all my other prior companies. Like if someone can own, okay, you're responsible for lead generation. You're responsible for awareness. You're responsible for life cycle, right? Your job is to make sure those customers come back, right? You're responsible for this. Like, what are those key metrics that they're specifically ownership area in? And then you go deep. And when you think about that, it also then, how do you hire? What is that skill set I need? And that's where the strategy plays in. How are we going to do lead generation, right? What are the tactics we're using? Is it content or is it paid media? Right? Is it web optimization? Like what is it a partnership with sales? And so when you can then say, okay, we need to do this, we're strategy, here's how we want to do it. And now here's the skill set that goes with it to go deep and drive the success with it. And every time I've seen a team built that way, they've been a great little band, our musicians together, and they trust each other. I think it builds trust. That's something else that I think is really important on a marketing team. You need to trust that domain expert in that one area. And so you could all work together. I miss some of my counterparts I used to work with to be like, no, I'm not messaging girl. You're the messaging girl. What's the message? Like, come help me. What would you do differently here? And like, they're the experts at it. They can make that happen. Right. And so I think it's really understanding you can't hit multiple metrics as a executor. You have to hit one. And so how do you focus the team on that?
I love this follow-up question to that because it just, we run into this all the time. And I know that you have, there's this mindset out there that marketing can just do it all. How do you address that mentality, especially with working with, maybe first-time founders and entrepreneurs? And quite frankly, it still happens with a lot of serial entrepreneurs as well.
Again, I'm going to tell you, I'm not the expert at this. I fail probably more than I win on it, but I think it goes back to aligning on expectations and having a trust together on sort of, here's what we're going to do. I hear that you think that's a problem, but we might not be attacking that, right? And then I balance that short-term wins, long-term gains type of strategy a lot of like, we'll do this. I know I hear you asking for it, but the way we do it is going to build into the longer term and success for it, right? But it's definitely this challenging in startups, right? That idea of, wait, why can't we do PR and this and that and this and that? And you're like, because look at your team. You have a team of 3 or a team of 2. And guess what? Your budget just got cut, right? Like you have to really be realistic. And I just think it maybe as I say this out loud and like confident, it's about communicating and being realistic. And I know I did it in my career way too much, but stop saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
And you can say yes, but no, right? And yes, but no, not right now.
I think it takes someone with a lot of experience in order to, number one, have the guts to say that, but number 2, for the CEO to respect it, which is tough. And it ties into the next question is, when does a brand know that it's the right time to hire a CMO? And is it the CRO or is it, the chief sales officer? It's just this mix of mindsets right now, thinking that, either revenue, sales, or marketing can do it all.
Oh, yes. When's the right time to hire a CMO? My advice for any founder listening or any sort of CEO listening, hire a CMO when you want the conductor of an orchestra. Do not hire a CMO if you want I want a lot of things done and I want them to just go do it. Yeah. They're not a manager of projects. Yeah. They are a conductor of an orchestra, and they're going to help make sort of the music run and work together. That's what a great CMO is going to do, right? And when that music plays together, guess what? That audience had a really awesome time when they came. They saw the brand come to life. They heard it. They felt it. They were moved, right? They took the action you wanted them to do. That's what a good CMO is. And I think oftentimes, and it goes back to what we were saying before, is like that tactical to strategic, right? Early stage founders or founders who haven't been part of a brand build before don't realize that it's not just tactics that build. It is this, okay, we have to build the bottom of the snowman first. That's the foundation. How do we build that foundation? And guess what? Foundation costs money to build. It's not free. It's not just things, right? And then the next snowball goes on, right? What's that snowball? I bet you know, Lori, I like to call it, you get the foundation, and then you have the, okay, now we're testing and we're learning and we're developing, right? This is, how do we enter a new channel? How do we add more channels, right? We have that risk idea, that outdoor campaign I wanted to do. You create that test and learn, iterate, and then you have the next thing on it. Is it the new idea, the new big channel, the new product that's launched? What is it, right? Or is it we're just optimizing the channels and they're all continuing to grow? But normally it's foundation build, test, iterate, develop new channels, and then it's, okay, what's next in order to scale? And it's always that leap. I would say it's the new linchpin opportunity. It can be the new product. It could be the new channel. Ooh, this new channel is going to go big and huge and we're going to develop into it. But I think that's where founders like, oh, we want the CMO. We want that right now. And it's like, no, you just need a head of marketing. And it's okay. It's okay to say, I just need a head of marketing to be a project manager, ultimately a team manager, to help us in that foundation of how are we going to build all this out. That's okay. But you really, when you want a CMO, it's when you want the conductor of the brand orchestra, ultimately.
Well, it's the strategic leader.
Yeah.
That's going to orchestrate the growth along with revenue and sales. Without the awareness that so many people, we see so many brands that are misaligned in the funnel. They actually start their programs mid-funnel. They don't have the awareness that is needed ultimately to be successful. And I think it takes a real strategic mind in order to look at a situation and say there's no way you will succeed because you don't have top of funnel managed. And that takes the conductor, the strategic leader of marketing, in order to visibly be able to find that out.
Yeah. During my era at Slice, I shared the story of we did the big outdoor campaign and I was nervous.
Yeah.
We saw great awareness numbers. We saw awesome and like downloads from a consumer perspective, and the app were great. Website traffic was great. We had inbound on employees, like the career page, everyone like, what are they doing? I want to be part of this. But what we learned is we had a leaky bucket. Our app was not converting the consumers or giving them the experience they ultimately wanted, right? They were coming in, I want to find a local pizzeria that I can order from. This is great. And they would go in and be like, but you don't have the pizzeria down the street from me that I want to order from. So we had a miss on, go do awareness, drive this brand, but we didn't have the right ecosystem of venues. And so that's really then my job shifted from a consumer awareness growth to how to really enable the sales team to scale and drive, not even from a product, it was drive the acquisition of more pizzerias, right? And so we ended up pivoting the campaign a bit to be much more about educating pizzerias why they wanted to be a part of our ecosystem. And our expectation on the campaign shifted to be less about consumers downloading the app and more about, are more pizzerias interested in being part of our ecosystem? And are they understanding the benefit we bring that's different than an Uber Eats or a DoorDash or a Grubhub, right? And so it was this new flip that brought to it, but it speaks volumes to like, you need to be able to look and say, okay, we all want awareness, but how's that funnel going to path down? And are we ready for it? And sometimes you have to say, we're not ready for that yet, right? I have to do that all the time at Union. I have to be like, not ready. We'll get there one day. We're still in this foundation build. We're not there yet. Like, can't wait till we get there, but we're not there yet, right?
I love that example so much because what it took was a lot of strategic minds, instead of pointing fingers, saying the campaign is working. We're building the awareness. We're not converting because of A, B, C, D, and E, and ultimately getting all the powers that be in a room together to ideate and gain insights that can lead to a better strategy. That's what you did. Take us back to that table. What was it like? What was happening?
Oh, well, I think so. I could take it that specific table, but I think that's the power of startups and the
Yeah.
power of like what I was saying before you asked me prioritization. It is about learning every day and building that snowman over time,
Yeah.
right? And I think those conversations are about, okay, this failed, but we did it. What did we learn from it? Why did it fail? And now how do we take it to the next place? And as a startup marketer, you need to be doing that constantly, right? I can look back 2 years ago when I started at Union, the messaging that we put out, I was like, why aren't we talking about these awesome rewards that ultimately we give to a consumer, right? And the venue gets the full price back. So like we have union funded rewards in the app experience that gives you like $5 off a drink or your favorite vodka brand, right? Like you get $5. Consumers love that. The venue gets full price where it's a fully funded reward. And we weren't talking about it. And so I was like, how do we weave it in? But what I realized was like people internally didn't have they didn't know how to talk about it, right? And so it was all this messaging game to do it. But if I had just gone out and done like a campaign around rewards without thinking through, oh, why is nobody talking about this? Because they don't know exactly the nuances to talk about it with, right? Like I need to do internal training. And so I think, going back to all of those tables that I have, it's about saying, even if we failed or something failed, right? What are we learning and how do we constantly take that to the next place, right? And you have to constantly have this growth mindset, and that's startup. True, like startups are not for the faint of heart, not for the person who wants to know what they're doing a year and a half from now. I had an old employee call me yesterday, and he's now at like a big, really cool, awesome brand. Like all of us on this call would love, as marketers, would love to work there. And he was like, Layne, we know the campaign we're doing 2 years from now. And I was like, you are
I
not in a startup anymore.
I love it. That is so cool. Earlier in the show, I promised our listeners that we'd talk a little bit more about budget. I want to do it very quickly here. We know it's the elephant in the room. How do you approach the discussions in a startup environment about budget, typically knowing that what you're provided is not going to achieve the goals that are expected?
I think budgets at the end of the day, and I had two phenomenal CFOs who taught me golden ratios, Layne. It's all about a golden ratio. Your marketing budget needs to start based on a percentage of your revenues. You even said it before, right? Like, what is everyone else spending and how much are you giving to marketing? Is marketing 1% of your budget or is marketing 50% of your budget? Like, what is that? And I think that's where it has to you start is like, what is the golden ratio that you're given across the teams? And now what is everyone expected? What are we trying to hit? And what is everyone expected to do? And a good conductor will come back and say, here's what we can do with this. But if you gave me this, here's what I think we could do. Or you gave me this and I actually don't need all of that. We want this. And so, but I think the biggest thing to me and the biggest learning that I've had in my career, it is not tell me what you need in order to go do this, marketer. It is, here's what the world I want you to start in with goals. And then how do we break it down, right? And you have to be able to have the experience of saying, this won't do this will do this, or here's what I'm thinking, right? And have those conversations, but not easy to have, Lori.
Well, they're not. The goals are so tough because if you were going to market for the first time, your goals, your acquisition goals are going to be something, it's a guess. Yes, based on wisdom, based on gut, based on maybe some of the information you've been able to glean through beta, whatever it might be. But it is still a guess. And then just moving the goalposts along the way is truly the approach that brands need to take.
Yeah. And again, startups, you don't know what your LTV of a customer is. If you just launched this product, right? You don't know. Are the customers going to stick around for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Like you have to start putting a line in the sand and saying, well, we're going to base this plan on a 24-month LTV, right? And guess what? We're going to monitor those new customers coming in and understand, are they behaving the way we expected them to? If they don't, what are we doing about it? Are we putting initiatives to get them to behave that same way that first early cohort did? Or are we going to just assume, hey, like what happens with most brands, your first cohort is going to be a really strong early adopters who have a really high LTV. And it's going to deteriorate as you get more and more of them, right? But that's where then it goes back to, and I even failed, like as you grow and as you scale and you're sort of, what stage is the business at? You need to add those new foundations to think about, right? Of like, okay, now we need the lifecycle marketer to come in and be like, what are we doing to really engage? You got to move beyond just a newsletter, right? What are we doing to really drive that? And so, yeah, like it makes that startup budget challenge even harder, right?
I love it. I mean, so many pieces of wisdom today. My goodness. Before we sign off here, what final advice do you have for the founders, the entrepreneurs, and the marketers listening today?
You probably got the sense of how I am, my own persona of how I build my own teams. But my biggest advice is specifically in startups. If you're in a startup, you're building something that hasn't been built before. You're solving problems that haven't been solved. Realize nobody has the answer. And it's that collective team that needs to communicate, build together, challenge each other, learn together, right? That's going to make it successful. I think in my own career, oftentimes, I felt like, well, they have to have the answer. Like there's got to be a way to do this, right? And in reality, there's not. And the way you do it is by collaborating, communicating, telling someone, I don't know, let's figure this out, right? Like, and I think that is my secret of wisdom, I guess I will share out of like, be okay not knowing, be okay to ask for help, and realize it's actually on us in the room to solve this together. And so look around that room. Those are the people, like it's about building the right competencies in that room to solve your problem, right? And it's one thing I love about my CEO at Union is like, I look at the leadership team and I was like, holy shit, for what we're building, like you got the payment processor expert, you got the alcohol brand expert, you got me who gets marketplaces and brand building and then you have him. Like it is like, you look around the room like, holy shit, we have the right minds to solve this problem together and grow it. And then the team underneath you. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, my team knows, the whole company knows, I like to say, nobody has the answers because guess what? Nobody has built a category like this as we're doing. We're disrupting the point of sale space. We're not about processing dollars. We're about building a better experience on premise with data that's going to pay back dividends to everybody involved. And we don't know, like, great. Another company could have sent an email, could have done this, could have done that. But how are we going to do it, right? And I think that's the unlock.
Well, Layne, you have been a real gift today. So thank you so much for just everything, the pearls of wisdom, many, many pearls of wisdom throughout our discussion today. So thank you for that. What is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
Probably on LinkedIn, Layne Cox on LinkedIn, and you'll see my alcohol bottles and Union next to my name. It was a pleasure being here, Lori. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, please email me, Lori@StrategyCast.com, and go to StrategyCast.com to sign up for our newsletter as well. Layne Cox, thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast.
Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.